are you?
Ragged. No Chris.
No Chris.
Yep, no Chris tonight. So you got some elbow room.
Get to work. A little smaller, huh?
Yep.
Bigger reading glasses.
Thicker contacts. Perfect. Okay, well, the time is 5 o'clock, so we might as well jump right in. So we do have a workshop tonight in regards to reviewing of proposed locations for the new fire station, for the rebuild of fire station number 1. And yes, happy birthday, Chief
Thank you,
Raleigh.
Mr. Mayor and Council and everyone. Appreciate that.
How's it feel to finally be in your 40s?
I tell you, in dog years, it's pretty good, but, thank you for this opportunity to come before council and come before staff and the community to talk about our fire station planning process that we've engaged. We're very blessed. The community approved our bond measure in November of last year. So we're now progressing with our next steps of growth and development and planning. As indicated in the bond is for a rebuild of Station 1 and then the construction of Fire Station 4. So once we received approval through the bond process, after the appeals process for bonds, we reached out to one of our local architects and recommitted to our plan, which is, as you can see on this slide presentation, rebuild Fire Station 1 with added capacity. That's a key piece of what we're looking for, is making sure that we have the ability to grow our resources in the core downtown area, and then also plan for Station 4 with increased service delivery in the area that's along Karcher. The voter-approved bond measure would secure construction of new Station 1 and a new fire administration in one building. And then the second phase is the plan is to include Fire Station 4 located at Lake and Karcher. So after we were secured the bond, we conducted a feasibility study. The final bond approvals by our voters reached out to professional consultants to finalize those developments, evaluating lot size, location, response times, potential benefits, potential threats. We had 3 primary locations that were considered for Fire Station 1. Fire Station 4 has already been predetermined in a 2-acre lot that's already been committed by the developer that's at Lake and Karcher, and I do have a schematic that I can show you of that plan. So we have 3 options. We have option A, option B, and option C. Option A is property we currently own on Chicago. Option B is the existing Fire Station 1 property. And option C would be the previous City Hall footprint that we've just exited out of in the last 24 hours. So our fire station options, for today, we want to review our pros and cons with council. We want to talk about different options for what those next steps would look like, and then move forward with design and construction. Noah, if you could go to the pros and cons section, please.
Mr. Chief, while he's doing that, where does Napa fall into the one out in Karcher and Lake?
So the Nampa station, or the joint Nampa station, is going to be a collaborative with Nampa as well as Caldwell Resources. We're going to be building for the future in terms of what the resources look like. It'll probably be a Caldwell engine and a Nampa squad that'll be staffed into that resource.
Under one roof?
Under one roof, yes, sir. Next page, please. Okay, so this is option A. So this is the property that we see on Chicago. Now, there are some pros and cons, and I'll just go through the pros and cons section of this site you can see here. It's a single-story construction, which means that would be reduced cost. It has ample parking and site area. There's easy apparatus maneuvering towards the rear of the site. The reserved property for future use as needed, so there is room for expansion and growth. The outdoor areas are at grade, and that would allow for fitness facilities and a barbecue facility for our crew members. The full front apron is also a benefit. That means you can pull your fire apparatus out onto the apron before going out onto the street. All bays are drive-through, which again is another benefit. Some of the cons that are associated with this lot is probably first and foremost, we've identified that there's a FEMA flood zone in that area. That presents some issues for us when it comes to building sustainable facilities and also federal grant funds. Further than the primary response area that we have here in downtown, it has increased response times to the south area of our current District 1, and it's a loss of fire department presence in the downtown area, and that's something that, speaking to all the crews and all the firefighters, there's a desire to want to stay in the downtown area. There's higher water tables with an expansive stormwater controls in that area, so that area that you can see that's towards the southeast of that footprint would more than likely have to be a runoff area or a water reclamation area. And then we also reviewed traffic and pedestrian activity, especially with the school across the street, and then the left turn on the Centennial Way as we wait for Idaho Department of Transportation to potentially block off Centennial. And then the return through the residential area, that's been voiced as a consideration as well. If we respond Code 3 down Chicago to downtown, that we're going through residential streets. Next slide, please, Noah. So Site 2 is the current site of Fire Station 1. There's pros associated with this. It maintains a similar response pattern to what obviously we currently have. Access to low traffic, and then street apparatus apron. So that's a little bit of a consideration. It maintains a fire department presence in the downtown. There's public visibility, public access, and proximity to other city departments. Now, here are the big cons with this site. It requires public works property if we were to expand at all. So this would be expanding into 621. So that's a big challenge for us because we're actually going to be growing our footprint and taking up real estate that we don't necessarily need. And it requires a temporary fire station facility. I can't overstress the challenges of moving crews and administration out of that site, probably into a double-wide mobile home somewhere in the vicinity of Station 1, and the cost of something like that can be upwards of $600,000 to $1 million just for that kind of move for a year to a year and a half. The other cons, if you will, it's two-story construction, which means it costs a little bit more than one-story construction. It's difficult apparatus maneuvering. As you can see, there aren't really great access points from the rear, which is the current challenge we have with Station 1. Coordination and construction adjacent to storm vaults. Another challenge we've identified, you can see on the screen that purple area. That purple area is some of the storm drains, some of the creek washout that exists there that actually sweeps out underneath the apparatus bay. So our best estimates is that would add $1 to $2 million to the cost of the construction of a station in that location. Coordination and construction adjacent to the storm vault, limited parking and site area. Parking's at a premium, and this site does not offer the parking that we would need. It would stifle the growth in this facility. We'd have to back into two of the bays. Again, not an option that we would prefer to do. We like to drive through the apparatus so that we can make sure that we have an easy access for our resources. And then it requires demolition costs associated with both buildings. So that's a concern for us as we did the review on this site. Noah, next slide, please. So then the option C, the final site to discuss and review with council, is the existing City Hall site. This maintains a similar response pattern to what we currently have. It maintains fire department presence in downtown, has public visibility and access, has adequate parking for the site, as you can see here, adequate apparatus maneuvering, proximity to other city departments, mainly City Hall and the Police Department. And this is of importance as we talk about our Department Operations Center that is proposed as part of the design in our training room, which would function as an Emergency Operations Center or an EOC. So that's part of our goal and vision, is to have the Police Department as well as City Hall staff be able to respond to this facility to stand up an Emergency Operations Center. Now, some of the cons is very similar to option B. It's two-story construction, so that means stairs and an elevator. The primary access is a busy one-way street. However, we believe we can mitigate access along Blaine by making sure that we have a flashing red light not necessarily a controlled intersection, but a flashing hazard light as traffic is progressing westbound on Blaine. 2 of the bays we're proposing would be back-in bays, so that would be a little bit of a challenge, but our primary bays, as we respond out into the community, would be pull-throughs. And then it requires demolition costs, very similar to Station 1 and to the 621 building, but we believe that these would be minimal in comparison to that other site. Now, if we could go to the response time slides. So the next 2 PDFs that I'm going to show council and staff are some of the response time products that we generated to kind of show the challenges and the benefits to both sites. So this first one you can see is the Chicago site. And if we could scroll up a little bit, Noah, and we can go to the center. There we go. So there's a benefit associated with the Chicago site when it comes to service to the west and to the north, going up into the northern part of not just the city, but also the rural district. But one of the areas that presents a little bit of challenge that is more evident in the next slide that I'll show you is it reduces the coverage that we have along the main corridor in front of the college, going down towards going down towards Linden and going down to some of the areas that are more challenging in terms of response times. We could go to the next slide, Noah. Oh, the next PDF, yeah. So this is with the station at the City Hall footprint. You can see in that area where all of the response zones merge together in the center of town, this provides 100% or close to 100% coverage in the center of town. To give you a little bit of explanation of what you're seeing is those smaller patches, the blue, the kind of like pinky purple, and the skin fleshy toned areas are 5-minute response times from the 3 stations, stations 1, 2, and 3. And the larger colors, the green, the light blue, and the purple are 10-minute response times. So our Station 4, which will be on the southern edge of the Station 2 coverage area, that will help to fill in some of the difficult to serve areas that we're looking at on the southern part of town. And it'll also allow for increased coverage by our other 3 stations. This information came from our partners at Canyon County, working with the GIS folks up there. They were able to develop these response times very similar to what Canyon County paramedics use. And the thing that I find really interesting from a data perspective is if you take one of those stations out of your response matrix, then it will then, in their process, show you the increased response times on this slide. So this is the perfect evaluation or the perfect scenario where all 3 stations are available. And let's go to the last document. So here's an example of some of the preliminary or tentative plot plans that we're looking at for Station 1. This allows for at least 3 pull-through apparatus bays and 2 that have the ability to back in. We want to partner in the future. Hopefully, Chief Stoll's here, back there. We want to partner in the future with our strong stakeholders, with Canyon County paramedics. As we move forward with any of our facilities, we want to make sure that we have enough room and space in our facilities so they can be part of our team. Next page, please, Noah. This shows you an example of the existing City Hall area, or actually this is the existing Station 1. Next slide. And this would be one of our proposals for City Hall. And the next slide. And this would be as we look at options for Chicago. And then the last page is this brief schematic of what Station 4 would look like. That'll be our next design matrix for the property that we have at Lake and Karcher. been working with a developer there, and this footprint, very similar to our Fire Station 3, would sit in that lot that we have there currently. So if we could go to the last page of the PowerPoint, we can pivot back, Noah, I'd really appreciate that. So we want to finalize the value of the existing fire properties. So that would be Fire Station 1 and 7th Street in Chicago. Recommend final location comment, from council, and move forward with the design and construction. But today I stand for questions so that we can talk about, what our next options are. My recommendation would be the City Hall site. I believe that that's going to address our needs in terms of growth and staying downtown. I do believe that the funding that we could receive by selling Station 1, as well as our property on Chicago, could help to fill the gap and make sure that the city is whole, and make sure that the funding goes back to the city for the other projects that were committed from the sale of City Hall.
Okay, questions, Councilor Stoddard?
Sure. I agree with you 100% on what the location should be when you look at the pros and cons, and then the revenue that we'll receive back from where it's located now. On the Station 4 at Karcher, is that going to exit on Karcher or exit on Lake?
It's going to exit on Lake.
Okay.
And I'll email council the plot plan that I received from the developer. It's basically south of Karcher. You turn onto Lake, and then you make a left into another side street, and it's sitting right there. So the back of the station would be backing up to some commercial, and then the commercial is fronting Karcher. So our crews won't actually have to exit onto Karcher, which is a good thing.
Yeah. So, and when you do that, you'll have the automatic light that blinks red, right? And then the south side of that now will butt up against that new subdivision, won't it? Next to okay. Did you receive any feedback from that at all? Or?
No, not from the subdivision. The developer's been great because we're butting up to commercial, so we're really not impacting any of the residents. And I believe that this is a great location because it'll give us that ability to shoot up Lake and cover back into a large portion of the south side of town, while we can also make that left and go back into areas as they grow down west on Karcher.
Okay, on your plan too, that's gonna be what, 5 lanes there on Karcher, right? No problem with that at all as far as
No, because there's a commercial area that's been identified with stores, and I think I want to say that there's a supermarket in there, so that's set back far enough so that's going to be that fronting of Karcher, and then the fire station will be behind that on a side street.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Councilor Doty?
Just some comments. So, the way you're explaining with your partners and growing, though, wouldn't Chicago be the better area for the growth if you needed to expand the fire station? It sounds like some of your presentation is you're pretty limited, plus you gotta go 2 stories high. You gotta remove another building. With Chicago, you could just hit the ground running, so to speak, and then you could have your drive-through bays on Chicago where you can't do that over here, correct?
There are some definite advantages to the Chicago site, but that said, the flooding piece, even though we could negate that by elevating the station, we still wouldn't have the ability to respond out around that area because we would be limited. We'd basically be on an island. And then the other challenge that we saw in terms of response times is that area that's difficult to serve that's around the college, going from the college all the way down to Linden. So we'd see increased response times there. We'd have better response times out into some of the more rural areas, but we'd be robbing Peter to pay Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that happens with growth, and
Yeah.
that's why we're building fire station
Yeah.
number 4. I guess the only one I'm would totally be against is building it where the current fire station is at. The expenses and the offset to the taxpayer to move people for a couple of years, we say 600,000, but we all know it tends to go a lot higher than our estimate. So I guess I'd like to take some time and research a little bit more. And I understand the flood problem with Chicago, but it certainly sounds like the type of fire station you would prefer if only we could fit it where City Hall is at, right?
I think there's definitely an advantage to that, but some of the intangibles as well, in terms of having a presence downtown, I think that has, builds teams, whereas if we were to be out there on Chicago, we'd be kind of out of sight, out of mind in terms of relationships with PD and City Hall. And I think there's a lot of value to that, where you can work together in EOC training, you can work together in terms of response through that main corridor. If we had more property in that location, it would be ideal. The nice thing that I've seen with this architect and all of the proposals is we're looking for areas where we can expand and contract, and that we can have enough space regardless of where we build. And that's our vision, is for building the right size station. So to give you an example, all of the plans have 5 bays. Currently, we only have 3 bays at Station 1. So we really want to be true to the ask that we sent to the voters, to say we want to be able to have extra growth and have extra resources at all of our stations. And we can accomplish that at all 3, but I think that Station 1 at City Hall, we could accomplish that and also maintain tradition, have ownership in the downtown area.
Yeah, and then just my last
Yeah.
comment, Mr.
Mhm.
Mayor. So my only concern was that is at the time we moved into the new City Hall building, there was some discussion as to what to do with City Hall to recoup some of that money.
Mm-hmm.
And so that also plays a factor in the decision, but I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Councilor Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, thank you for being here on your birthday.
Anytime.
Obviously a big decision, and appreciate all the forethought you've put into this. I agree with Councilor Doty. I think Station 1's location really needs to be off the table for too many reasons to repeat. But I tend to think that the flooding plain issue could be a bigger problem on Chicago, and could create issues that are unforeseen, especially as seldom as we do flood, it's never planned. Emergencies are never planned, and that's when we would need you the most. And for you to be taken out of the game because you're isolated or can't move equipment or people couldn't get to you, plus you mentioned that would be a challenge with grants at that location. And so my biggest heartburn goes back to what was just said, though, is when we agreed to move City Hall, we said there was going to be a deficit that would need to be made up for by selling that property. So I think we would be able to mitigate that loss if we sold the Chicago property and the property that Station 1 currently sits on. So I think I'm in agreement with you on that proposal right there, and would lean that way at this time. The only other question I had is, when the developer first came to us is that the Charles? That's part of the Charles project, right?
Yep.
And he offered the property for fire. At that time, we said, would you give us a little more than what you're offering? Because it's so far out there at the other end of the city. We said it'd be nice to have a substation out there for the police department. Is that still any part of the vision for that property, or did they get forgotten because that was so long ago?
No. As we move closer with capital improvement planning and impact fee discussions with Raylan and with the police department, our intent is to have a collaborative, so we can have a station, so we can have a substation. And that still needs to be designed out. And as we do the pre-planning piece, after we've completed Station 1, we'll be working closely with our police department as well as Canyon County paramedics to get to a design where we can support all facets of that. One of the challenges that, and this is kind of like the give and take a little bit, one of the things that we'd like to put into fire stations are community rooms, so that local members of the community can come out, whether it's an HOA, whether it's Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and they can use that facility, because some of those places are difficult to find depending upon the development. So we may have to sacrifice a community room for a police substation, but that's a higher priority for me in terms of what we can fit into a lot size. So it'll take some conversations and discussions to get there, but it's definitely something we want to include.
Agreed. Property and buildings are too expensive to not maximize what we might be able to get out of that property. Thank you, Chief.
No, thank you.
Did you have any questions, Councilor Register, or comments?
I just kind of had a question that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but, I know there's a lot of historical, items, I guess, at Station One. Are you planning on putting anything at the new Station One to, showcase those?
Yes, we are. In fact, the architect that helped us with our consultation and feasibility study, they're building and designing Boise Station 5. And so there was a little bit of angst, if you will, as the firefighters were leaving a station that they'd loved and cherished for years, moving into a brand new station across the street. So not only are the historical artifacts being moved over to a designated area in that station, but certain elements that are kind of sacred to the firefighters are being incorporated into the design. So apparently there's a manhole cover at Boise 5 that is from like 1910, and that's going to be incorporated into the apparatus bay. And some of the bricks are going to be incorporated in as well. So we would be doing the same thing with our station. We'd be taking those key elements.
And then my other question, are there police officers that are working out of one of the buildings by City Hall?
So the building right next to, at the hard corner, is for SROs currently. So we are actually in process working with Chief Ingram of relocating them.
Where are they gonna go?
So the potential location is not finalized yet, and that'll obviously need to come for budget. A request on that is out actually at the airport. So the large conference room, there's a back area where it actually has half of the wall already. So we would just enclose that wall, and then they'd have that whole space. So Chief Ingram seems to like it. I think it'd work out really good for them. So they're looking at adjusting, moving over there as a
But would
possibility.
it have to come back here and be somehow fit in this building?
For those
SROs?
Yes,
or-
Rose. So yeah, so I mean, that is an option as well. It just appears that that's the better option right now, is that what Chief Ingram has looked at and that we've discussed with him.
So just in my opinion, just kind of piggybacking on what they were saying, is my concern too about the potential flooding issue. Not that I think anything's gonna flood, but does that raise rates for insurance and all of the stuff that comes with it? And then, of course, the problem with potentially getting grants that we might not be seeing. I think the biggest concern I have is the space. So if we grow like we've been growing, do we have any kind of contingency plan with using a smaller lot? Like, what are we gonna do? Or are we gonna build another station if we don't have the room to add on, I guess is the...
No, thank you. And that's a really good point, because it segues into one of the next steps that we're going to working in the fire department, which is we focused in on our key facilities and the growth of one station in the short term. I believe that we're going to have more than enough room with the 12 dorm rooms that we're anticipating for Station 1 to handle the growth of the resources for what we need in the downtown core. But we're looking at we're having conversations about Station 5 and Station 6 and ways that we can work with developers over the course of the next 5 to 10 years so that we can put a stake in the ground in areas that we know are going to be difficult to serve as growth continues. So we're looking at Farmway Village as an option and working with our partners in Middleton, Midstar Fire. We're also working with the rural district as they grow and we annex into the rural area. And then we're also looking at areas along 2026. As we see the development that's going from here to Canada, we understand that that's going to be an area that potentially is going to need another station as we conduct that assessment. So what we're doing is we're taking the response time information that we talked about tonight and putting that into a long-term plan that we can present to council, and we can have snapshots of that plan that we can share in the budget process so that we can have a capital improvement plan that can identify what those stations look like.
Thank you.
Any questions, Councilor Denver? So I did have one on the proposed site 2 or 3, the one at the old City Hall. So the question I had was backing of those fire engines. I know right now they have to, but it's on 7th Avenue, which is very limited use. Would they be backing off of Blaine into those?
Well, in the
Bays
design, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the design we have, 3 of the bays are pull-through, so they'd be coming through the parking area. And then, in fact, if we want to go, Noah, I might have a better picture that I can show the footprint. 3 of the bays would be pull-throughs. 2 of them would be back-ends, and that's where we'd place reserve apparatus. apparatus that's not used that often, because we really want to minimize the backing element. It's a potential, threat issue. Oh, let's see. It would be the, let's take a look. So from this view here, you can see that would they be entering from the rear of the station and driving through for 3 of the bays? 2 of the bays on the left side would be back-in bays. So we would have access to not only drive an engine through, but we've also done the design and comprehension for our truck company, because that has the larger wheelbase. So we wanted to make sure that we could drive through. We did not want to build a station where we had to back in.
Yeah, and that's good, because that was I'm like, if shutting down 7th's not a big deal, but if we're having to shut down Blaine all the time to back him in,
No.
that could be an issue. So it's good to know that you do have that designed, that it would do that, and just be the smaller, less frequently used ones that may have to back in occasionally on it. Okay, that was the only question I really had. Any other? Yes, Councilor Register.
If we're selling the Station 1 property as it is that, cancel any plans of a parking garage?
So those are things that would have to be determined. Obviously, that's been discussed as a great location for a parking garage right there in downtown, but not in downtown, but literally just across the street. So those are things we'd have to look at, and Raylene can kind of weigh in too. So with this property, if I'm not mistaken, it would be more or less purchased. This one right here on the map, the old City Hall, it's not just given away. So it would have to go through like a purchasing of the fire department's funds on that. And then obviously, if we were gonna try to build the parking garage at where one is, then we would need to purchase that property from the fire department. Even though we are pretty much one and the same, we still, because there is those differences, and she's shaking her head, so I'm thinking that I'm tracking on the right path on that. So there would be transactions taking place, appraisals done to see what the values of those properties are in that regards. Any other questions? Anything else, Chief, that you want to?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. And I'll email everything to our city clerk and then also to council, so you have hard copies, as well as the design for Station 4.
Perfect. Yeah. I'm thinking we should have your deputy chiefs come up and sing happy birthday to you.
Well, actually, better
Unless
yet,
the council wants to.
no, better yet, Chief Brian Daniels, has everyone had a chance, and this is called a deflection,
Yeah.
everyone ever had a chance to meet Brian Daniels? He's our new admin chief, started 3 weeks ago.
Hello?
He's going to sing solo. He's an opera singer. That's why we hired him. Yeah. They took me to lunch today, which was great. Extreme Pizza. Thank you, Council.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, that was the only item, I believe, correct, on that. So that concludes our workshop. So we'll end that at this time and be back here at 6 p.m. to begin our regularly scheduled city council meeting.